Guys, in this video, we have Jordan Peterson, we have Douglas Murray, basically talking about why diversity isn't our strength. Isn't our strength, all right? So get ready. I always tell you guys, viewer discretion is advised, because some of the topics we talk about may, be a little touchy to some people, but without further ado, we get right into it. Let's ride.
Nice. I might have said this to you in private before, Jordan, but I say it would be madness if people from the Indian subcontinent made up 3% of your population, it would be madness to try to demoralize that population or to try to find ways to just say that they were nothing and never had been anything, and it was sort of best if they just tried to sidle through their lives without harming anyone. Why would you do that to 3% of the population? Among other things, it's rude, it's cruel, it's unusual, and that 3% of the population is a significant amount of the population. You don't want to demoralize 3% of the population. Okay. Why would you do that to a majority? Who is so insane that they want to do this to majority populations? And the answer seems to be, well, we're finding out. We are finding out.
Well, okay, let's delve into that on the ideational front. I mean, I would say, who would want to do that? Well, my sense is that it's this metastasization of Marxism. It's the spirit that metastasized Marxism that's bringing this about, and consciously. And so you have the people that hold the center, the majority of people who approximate some implicit ideal, however poorly. And then you have people who are perhaps unable to do that, or who are unwilling to do it, or who are even opposed to it. And they occupy the margin. And there's many of them. They're a plethora. And the postmodernists, especially the modern queer theorists, let's say, want to bring that margin into the center by whatever means necessary. Now, I think there's a profound philosophical misunderstanding that accompanies that desire. Although if the underlying desire at the base is just the desire for chaos, which is certainly possible, then it's not a mistake, it's not a bug, it's a feature. But
Jordan, I'm just going to comment on this, and Jordan Peterson's so right. But I want to say, personally me, I think the underlying thing here is control. I think it's control, right? And to be quite honest with you, they do have a good amount of control, right? If you say anything about men playing women's sports or just men painting their nails and all this stuff, which, by the way, I grew up in a different era. So if you want to paint your nails and you're a guy and you want to do all that stuff, I'm not knocking you. Go ahead and paint your nails, bro. I'm not knocking you. I no problem. All I'm saying is pushing it on you, right? Making you, especially with the young, impressionable youth, right? That's where I just gotta jump ship, right? But back to the video.
No, we tend to believe in the West that an idea has its opposite, and that progress might be obtained by watching the war of a thesis and its antithesis. But that's not how things work. You have a thesis and you have a plethora of antithesis. In fact, an infinite plethora. And so if you try to center the marginal, all that happens is you demolish the entire structure. And one of the ideas that I've been working on recently, conceptually, is that imagine that now you're motivated to center the marginal at all cost. And you presume to begin with, because you're naive or corrupt, that those marginal are a community, and they're a community with something in common apart from their marginalization. Well, that's certainly the claim of the alphabet mob, for example. We're all a community. It's like, yeah, I don't think so. It doesn't look like it. It looks to me like you're a plurality united by your, what would you say, your resentment. Okay.
And narcissism.
And narcissism. Okay, so then, but here's the subtle part of the argument, let's say, because, and I think this is true. It looks to me that if you demolish the center by centering the marginal, you destroy the marginal first, not the center. Because the thing is, Douglas, the center is protected. Let me give you an example. Because I think this is relevant. So since the 1960s, since the early 1960s, under the guise of the sexual revolution, there's been an all-out assault, let's say, against the structure of marriage. And so, and the consequence of that is that many people aren't married. But none of those people are wealthy and educated, because the wealthy and educated are just as married as they were in the early 60s. The people who aren't married are the economically marginalized, let's say, the people who are in trouble. And so that freedom that came from the removal of the patriarchal ideal, which is a burdensome thing to bear, and also a judgmental entity, let's say, single mothers aren't to be tolerated, that finger-wagging sort of morality. It's like, fair enough. Okay, now we bring the marginal to the center. Who dies first? The center? No, the marginal.
Yes. Well, they give another.
I'm going to be honest with you guys. This is a somewhat interesting topic because, obviously I'm a person of color, right? So in our community, unfortunately, the biggest thing is the youth growing up without their fathers, right? One thing, and I don't know if they're going to touch on it, and if they don't, that makes sense, but I can kind of provide you maybe some insight. I mean, from my perspective is you have the marginalized, and then you have the different, classes in terms of your wealth, right? You have obviously race and all this other stuff that, unfortunately, whether we like to say it or not, plays a part in the whole bigger picture, right? In terms of, how people view you, right? And I think the most important thing is to treat people with respect, right? To follow our Constitution, our constitutional rights. And I feel like we definitely take for granted a lot of the rights that we have in this country that if you go in other countries, just don't have, right? Just don't have. And yes, I do believe that sometimes, especially during certain periods, 2 years ago, right? Or I think it was more than that. But when you would post something on social media, they would suppress it, right? You guys probably know what I'm talking about during that period of time. And, it's different in certain places, right? So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Am I wrong? Am I right? But back to the video.
Example of that, which is you see that in I don't go on a tangent to it, but you see that in the drug normalization, which is the elite classes who almost always push for further liberalization in laws are actually the people who, if they do dabble in that themselves, are most likely to be able to be saved. After all, there's a reason that their job will probably support them if they want to go into rehab. And they will be able to pay, and maybe even their office will pay, maybe their firm will pay. Not so for the people lying on the streets of this city with absolutely no safety net, who have not benefited from that liberalization process, to say the least. But it's the same thing, absolutely. The people you bring in the most marginal case, and then yes, in the end, the marginalized become the people who suffer the most. And by the way, I mean, we've just lived through this bizarre, sort of social stampede on the Paris Olympics thing. But what you said was just resonating with me, because I say, why is it now so completely predictable that an Olympic Games will have to open with a sort of balls out bearded drag queen being the center of attention, and a very obese trans person should be the kind of like the main figure of worship in this bizarre modern cult theology? And I know you notice this, I notice this. The truth is, everybody notices this. It's absurd.
Yep,
it's a kind of replacement theology, as far as I can see, and one that hasn't been thought through at all well, and doesn't work, and is hideous and ugly. And
another thing too is the people in the trans community don't even like it. So forget about what everybody else thinks, right? They think it's overdoing it, right? The community doesn't like it. They think it's overdoing it, right? Not everybody, of course. In my opinion, I think that's kind of, anyway, I could get started up. Back to the video.
Does not encourage people to aspire to anything beautiful or true.
Yeah, well, that's the dread abomination of desolation, right? That the theologians warned about. When it's put in the highest place, then it's time to head for the hills. And what does that mean? It means something like, well, when the social order is so inverted that the most monstrous is elevated to the highest place, then that's a sign that that chaos is about to return. And that seems to me to be highly probable. Well, we can see it, and everyone can feel it. Absolutely everyone can feel it in one form or another. You can, it's very terrifying to see it start to emerge in such a dramatic form in the UK. And it is something as a Canadian, it's really something to go to Europe and hear the elite types express doubt about whether or not they have a culture. You know, I heard people in the Netherlands say that to me. I met a group of, you know, very well-placed comedians and artists and writers, and most of them were conservative people, and they expressed doubts about even the existence of their own culture. You know, and I come from the hinterlands of northern Canada, and I go to a place like Amsterdam, it just makes my bloody jaw drop. And it's the same whenever I visit the UK. It's like, you people don't think you have a culture? It's like, well, who has pretensions to a culture then? Like, if Europe doesn't have a culture, then no one has a culture. I mean, Europe has a culture that's so miraculous that people make pilgrimages there in the tens of millions just to see its remnants.
Yes.
So
yes.
It's like, what the hell is this claim?
It's the nicest way to interpret what has been attempted in that regard is, it's nicer to incomers if we do ourselves down a bit, because otherwise it's boastful. And maybe that is the instinct of some people. It's been a stupid thing to try to progress that from an instinct into an actual policy, and to fall back on the sort of mantras of, you know, everyone's a migrant, for instance. I mean, this is one of the ones that has just been endlessly forced on people. And again, sorry to keep referring to it, but as I said in The Strange Death of Europe, people in Europe, Europeans, British people, others, do notice that if they moved to China or India, they would not become Chinese or Indian. They do notice that. And they do notice that if they had children in that country, their children would not be regarded as Indian or Chinese either. And that's just to pick out two countries that happen to be the largest ones. But in that case, a lot of people think, how come anyone can move here and immediately become us? And the answer is, that's not clear at all. It doesn't seem obvious at all. At the same time, of course, nobody wants to say nobody can become like us, because that's too judgmental and too negative a thought, too pessimistic.
Okay, so I'm gonna push lightly back on Murray here. We're advertising that, though, and that's been advertised like that for as long as I can remember, right? Come here, get freedom, be a part of what we have going on here, the melting pot, all this stuff, right? You don't see India marketing that, right? You don't see China marketing that. You don't see anywhere else. Where else is marketing that, right? So, you know, I do want to, and the idea of it, of course, obviously millions and billions at this point, obviously, if people have adopted that, right? But, well, I said billions, no, millions, excuse me, millions of people, hundreds of millions at this point, right? I think there's like 300 million people, something like that in the United States. Anyway, but yeah, I just wanted to interject and say that, right? Back to the video.
Pessimistic a thought. And so what happens is just a set of stupid and banal lies. Diversity is our strength. That's another one. Diversity is our strength is possibly the main mantra of British and European societies now. And actually, again, as mantras go, is false. Diversity does bring some strengths, and it also brings some weaknesses. Diversity can bring a range of ideas, and it can bring ideas so terrible that they could destroy the society. It wasn't great that Ali Harbi Ali's parents moved from Somalia to the UK, got asylum, and their son then macheted an MP to death in his surgery. We didn't need the Ali family to bring the worst of the war zones of Somalia to the streets of a British constituency. And so when you hear people saying things, insisting, everybody insisting all the time, diversity is our strength, people know it's a lie. People know at the very least it's a half-truth. And they get fed up with this stuff being forced at them, because all the time they're noticing the downsides of this. And the downsides include, by the way, I mean, it can never be said enough, the change of a society when the movement is so fast and the numbers are so large and the type of diversity is so difficult. people notice that, for instance, a high trust society of the kind that Britain used to be becomes a very low trust society.
And then
belief
becomes
in
poor. Yeah.
And the belief in institutions that used to characterize Britain, once all of those have delegitimized themselves, what are you left with? And then they come for the holy places, they come for your gods, they come for your temples, and people are meant to suck it up endlessly. And I've never been sure that they would.
So, well, here's an obvious question too. It's like, well, here
I just want to make a quick point to what Murray just said. At first, I didn't agree with him, but then as he kept talking, you know what? I think he's right, because ultimately, and the reason why I didn't agree, I'm like, okay, yeah, well, you want diversity, right? We get some of the smartest minds in this country, right? That come from all over the world, right? Smart people, most athletic people, right? Think about it. Look at the NBA. Look at all these, and these are just light examples, to be honest with you, yeah, right? So, but when you look at it as a whole, though, is Murray right? Like when you look at the country as a whole, right? I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle with that statement. I'm in the middle with it. Back to the video. Let me know what you guys think, though. Back to the video.
here's a definition of war. War is the definition of irreconcilable diversity. Right. So diversity is our strength. It's like, okay, well, Hamas and Israel have diverse viewpoints and they're not reconcilable. So what do we have? A war. So what's the story that people are supposed to swallow? It's that although the world has been eternally mired in internecine conflict, the war between diverse viewpoints, if we import all that diversity into the West, magically we'll wave a wand and all that diversity will be transformed into nothing but what? Complex productive cooperation. In the absence, by the way, in the absence of any reconciling framework, because people like Trudeau, for example, dispense with the idea of any national identity whatsoever. So their presumption is something like the natural state of people, regardless of the diversity of their opinions, no matter how diverse those opinions are, their natural state is productive peace, right? So that's what? That's Rousseau? Is that what that is? Is that an unbelievably naive Rousseau?
Productive peace. Productive peace. You gotta love it. And to be quite honest with you, I understand it. Look, there's a lot of really good talking points here. You know, I push back a little bit on Douglas. I pretty much agree with Peterson and what he's kind of Peterson's agreeing with Douglas, so he's not really pushing back too much. But yeah, there were just some points in there that I'm in the middle on, like that last one. But I understand it, and ultimately, yeah, I think these guys are right. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Okay, thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you kick the like button and headbutt the subscribe button for more. Until next time, peace.